Part 1. THE letter. It was nearly midnight when Daniel received the letter. He had just finished work and was driving home through the quiet streets of Manchester when his phone rang. The call was from an unknown number. Daniel almost ignored it. But something made him respond. Hello? For several seconds, there was nothing but silence. Then an old man's voice whispered. Daniel. Yes. Who is this? My name is Arthur. I knew your father. Daniel's hands tightened around the steering wheel. His father had been dead for 40 years. At least, that was what Daniel had always believed. What do you want? I have something that belongs to you. What? Your father's watch. Daniel's heart stopped for a moment. His father had disappeared when Daniel was only 12. His mother always told him the same story. His father had left. He had abandoned them. He had never come back. Daniel had grown up believing that his father simply didn't love him enough to stay. Where are you? Daniel asked. The old man gave him an address. Then he added something strange. Like a halo. The call ended. Daniel was lost in his car for several minutes. He didn't understand why someone who knew his father had waited 14 years to contact him. And he certainly didn't understand how this man could have his father's watch. But before Daniel could think of a reason not to go, his phone received a message. There was only one sentence. Your mother never told you the truth. Daniel stared at the screen. For the first time in 14 years, he wondered whether everything he knew about his father's disappearance was a lie. Part 2. The old man. The following evening, Daniel drove to the address. It was an old cottage on the edge of a small village. Rain fell heavily against the windscreen. Daniel knocked on the door. Nothing. He knocked again. This time, the door slowly opened. An elderly man stood inside. He was thin, pale, and leaning on a wooden walking stick. You ate, he said. Daniel looked at him cautiously. Are you Arthur? The man nodded. As in. The cottage smelled of old books and wood smoke. Arthur walked towards a small table and placed a box on it. Daniel immediately recognized the watch. It had belonged to his father. He remembered seeing it when he was a child. His father used to wear it every morning. Daniel picked it up. The back of the watch had a small engraving. For Daniel. One day, you'll understand. Daniel's eyes filled with tears. What does this mean? Arthur didn't respond immediately. Instead, he walked towards the window. Your father did not abandon you. Daniel froze. What? He loves you more than anything. Then why did he leave? Arthur looked at him. He didn't leave. Daniel's voice became angry. My mom said he did. Your mother was trying to protect you. Protect me from what? Arthur sighed. From the truth. He reached into a drawer and removed an old photograph. It showed Daniel's father standing beside a railway station. On the back was a date. The 17th of November 2009. Daniel recalled that date. It was the night his father disappeared. Where was this taken? Arthur pointed at the photograph. Blackwood Station. Daniel stared at him. What happened there? Arthur's face became serious. Your father was waiting for a train. Why? To save someone's life. Daniel looked confused. Arthur didn't answer. Instead, he said quietly, your father's last train left Blackwood at 11:47 p.m. Daniel felt a chill run through him. What happened after that? Arthur looked directly into his eyes. That's the part your mother never told you. Part 3. 14 years earlier, Daniel had been 12 years old. He remembered that night vividly. His father had kissed him before leaving the house. Look after your mum for me, son. Daniel had laughed. I'm only 12. His father smiled. Then you'll have to become a very responsible 12-year-old. Daniel remembered his father's coat, his black shoes, and the smell of his aftershave. It was the last time Daniel ever saw him. Later that night, his mom received a phone call. She cried for hours. The next morning, she told Daniel that her father was gone. Daniel didn't understand. Where? I don't know. Is he coming back? His mother had looked at him. She wanted to tell him something, but she didn't. Instead, she hugged him. He loves you. Those 3 words were all Daniel had. Years passed. Daniel finished school. He went to university. He started working. He got married. And eventually, his mother died. But the question never left him. Why did his father abandon them? Now, standing in Arthur's cottage, Daniel finally had a chance to discover the truth. What happened at Blackwood? He asked. Arthur walked towards an old cupboard. There was someone else on that train. Who? A young woman? Daniel frowned. Who was she? Arthur slowly turned around. Her name was Eleanor. Daniel's heart skipped a beat. He had heard that name before. His mother used to mention it when she thought Daniel wasn't listening. Who was Eleanor? Arthur looked down. She was your father's sister. Daniel stared at him. My father had a sister? Arthur nodded. And she was in serious trouble. Part 4. Eleanor. Arthur told Daniel everything he knew. Eleanor had disappeared from the village several days before Daniel's father vanished. She had been frightened. She had told Daniel's father that someone was following her. At first, he didn't believe her. But then he discovered she was telling the truth. Someone had been watching her. Someone who didn't want her to speak. Eleanor had discovered something about a company where she worked. Money had been stolen. Large amounts. But she had also discovered something much worse. The people responsible were planning to blame an innocent employee. Eleanor had kept evidence. Documents. Photographs. Names. Everything. She planned to take the evidence to the police. But before she could, someone found out. Eleanor called Daniel's father. She told him she was scared. He promised to help her. That was why he went to Blackwood Station. Daniel listened quietly. So my father was trying to save his sister? Yes. What happened to Eleanor? Arthur looked away. She got on the train. And my father? He followed her. Then why didn't he come home? Arthur was silent. Daniel's voice became louder. Why? Arthur finally answered. Because the train never reached its destination. Daniel's face turned pale. What happened? There was an accident. Daniel stepped backwards. An accident? Yes. The train crash. No. Arthur looked towards the window. Someone stopped it. Part 5. The night everything changed. The train left Blackwood Station at 11:47 p.m. There were only a few passengers. Daniel's father boarded at the last moment. Eleanor was sitting near the back. She looked terrified. When she saw her brother, she began to cry. You shouldn't have come. He sat beside her. I promised Mum I'd look after you. Eleanor shook her head. They know. Who? Everyone who matters. She handed him an envelope. Inside were photographs, bank records, names, addresses, and a small memory card. If anything happens to me, Eleanor whispered, give this to the police. Daniel's father nodded. But then the lights inside the train went out. The carriage became completely dark. Someone walked across the train. Slow footsteps. Then the voice. Give me the envelope. Daniel's father stood up. No. The stranger moved closer. Eleanor grabbed her brother's arm. Run. They moved towards the next carriage. But the train suddenly stopped. Passengers screamed. Daniel's father pushed Eleanor towards the door. Get off. What about you? Go. Eleanor jumped off the train. Then she heard a terrible sound behind her. She turned around. Her brother was gone. The train began moving again. Eleanor ran into the darkness. She survived. But Daniel's father disappeared. For 14 years, everyone believed he was dead. Except Arthur. Because Arthur knew what had really happened. Daniel looked at him. You were there? Arthur nodded. I was the driver. Part 6. The secret. Daniel could barely breathe. You drove that train? Yes. Then you know what happened to my father. Arthur's eyes filled with tears. I know what I saw. Tell me. Arthur sat down. The train was forced to stop because someone had placed an object on the track. Who? We never found out. And my father? He was taken. Daniel stared at him. Taken where? Arthur pointed towards an old map. There was an abandoned railway tunnel outside Blackwood. Daniel looked at the map. The tunnel was marked with a red circle. Was my father taken there? Yes. By whom? Arthur shook his head. I don't know. Daniel stood up. You've known this for 14 years. I was threatened. By whom? Arthur looked directly at him. Your father's employer. Daniel froze. His father had worked for a financial company. A respectable company. At least, that was what Daniel had always believed. Arthur continued. Your father discovered the money theft. So did Eleanor. Yes. And they tried to silence them. Arthur nodded. Daniel suddenly remembered something his mother had said many years ago. Some truths are too dangerous to tell. He had thought she was talking about his father's death. Now I realized. She had been talking about something much bigger. Part 7. The box. Arthur opened the wooden box. Inside were several letters. One was dated 14 years earlier. Daniel recognized his father's handwriting. He opened it cautiously. The letter began, Dear Daniel, if you're reading this, something has gone terribly wrong. Daniel stopped reading. His eyes filled with tears. His father had written the letter before he disappeared. The letter continued, I need you to know one thing. None of this is your fault. I never wanted to leave you. I want to come home. Daniel covered his mouth. For 14 years, he had believed his father had chosen to leave. Now he knew that wasn't true. The letter continued. Your mother will tell you that I left because she wants you to have a normal life. Please don't hate her. She's only trying to keep you safe. Daniel looked at Arthur. Did my father know he might die? Arthur nodded. He knew he was in danger. The final line of the letter was, If I don't return, look for the red lantern at Blackwood Station. Daniel looked confused. What does that mean? Arthur's face changed. I don't know. You must know something. Arthur stood up. There was a red lantern at the station. Where is it now? Arthur looked towards the door. Still there. Daniel immediately reached for his coat. Then we're going to Blackwood. Arthur shook his head. No. Why? Because some people don't want that lantern found. Part 8. Blackwood Station. They arrived at Blackwood just before midnight. The station was almost completely abandoned. The old platform lights flickered in the rain. Daniel looked around. This place hasn't changed. Arthur nodded. The railway stopped using it years ago. Daniel walked along the platform. Then he saw it. A small red lantern hanging beneath the old station roof. His heart began beating faster. He reached for it. Inside the lantern was a tiny metal key. Attached to the key was a piece of paper. Only 4 words were written on it. Platform 3, Locker 7. Daniel ran towards the old lockers. Most were rusted shut, but locker number 7 still had a working lock. He inserted the key. Click. The door opened. Inside was another envelope. Daniel opened it. There was a photograph. His father, standing beside a little girl. Daniel stared at the photograph. Who is she? Arthur looked at it. His face went completely pale. I don't know. Daniel turned the photograph over. There was a name written on the back. Sophie. And underneath, Daniel's sister. Daniel couldn't move. My sister? Arthur said nothing. Daniel's mother always told him that he was an only child. Always. There had never been a sister. Never. At least, that's what Daniel had believed. Then Daniel noticed something else inside the locker. A birth certificate. The name on it was Sophie. Mother, Margaret. Father, Thomas. Daniel's parents. He felt the world disappear under his feet. Part 9. Sophie. Daniel spent the entire night searching for answers. Sophie was born 3 years before him. But she had disappeared when she was only 5. His mother had never mentioned her. His father had never mentioned her. Why? Arthur finally told him the truth. Sophie was seriously ill as a child. Her treatment was expensive. Daniel's parents struggled financially. Then someone offered to pay for Sophie's treatment. But there was a condition. They had to keep her existence a secret. Daniel's father agreed. But later, he discovered that the people paying for Sophie's treatment were connected to the same financial crime. They weren't helping the family. They were controlling them. They wanted Daniel's father to remain silent. And when he refused, they took Sophie away. Daniel looked at Arthur. Where is she now? Arthur handed him a piece of paper. My address. Daniel's hands shook. He drove there immediately. It was a small house in northern England. An elderly woman opened the door. Daniel looked at her. I'm looking for Sophie. The woman stared at him. Then she whispered, Daniel? He stopped breathing. How do you know my name? The woman began crying. I've been waiting for you. Part 10. Sister Sophie was alive. She was now a grown woman. She had spent years trying to discover where she came from. The elderly woman who had raised her had finally told her the truth before she died. Sophie had been adopted. Her real parents were Margaret and Thomas, Daniel's parents. When Daniel saw her, he did not know what to say. They stood in silence. Sophie then smiled through her tears. You look like Daddy. Daniel laughed nervously. So do you. They hugged. For the first time in 14 years, Daniel understood why his mother had kept so many secrets. But there was still one question. What happened to Dad? Sophie looked at him. He's alive. Daniel's entire body went cold. What? Found him. Where? Sophie handed him a photograph. It showed an old house by the sea. On the back was an address. He lives there. Daniel couldn't believe it. His father had been alive all these years. But why didn't he come home? Sophie looked down. Dad wanted to come back. Then why didn't he? He was protecting us. From whom? Sophie took a deep breath. The people who threatened Mum. Daniel suddenly understood. His father hadn't abandoned them. He had stayed away because returning would have put them in danger. But now, the danger was gone. Part 11. Returned. Daniel drove towards the coast. The journey seemed endless. When he finally reached the house, the sun was beginning to rise. He stood outside the door. His hands were shaking. He knocked. Nothing. He knocked again. Then the door opened. An older man stood in front of him. His hair was gray. His face was thin. But Daniel knew those eyes. Dad. The man froze. For several seconds, neither of them spoke. Then his father whispered, Daniel? Daniel couldn't hold back his tears. He stepped forward. His father opened his arms. They hugged. 14 years of anger. 14 years of questions. 14 years of pain. All disappeared in that one moment. I thought you left us, Daniel whispered. His father cried a little. It never leaves you. Why didn't you come home? Because I was told that if I returned, you and your mother would die. Daniel closed his eyes. I hate you. I know. I thought you didn't love me. His father held him tightly. There wasn't a single day when I didn't think of you. Then Daniel remembered the letter. The watch. His father smiled. I knew one day someone would find you. Why didn't you tell me? Because I want you to have a life without fear. Daniel looked at him. It's over now. His father nodded. Yes. But there was one final thing he needed to tell Daniel. The person who started all of this was someone Daniel already knew. Part 12. Truth. Daniel looked at his father. Who? His father hesitated. Arthur. Daniel's heart sank. Arthur. He wasn't just the train driver. What was he? He worked for the company. Daniel remembered everything. The mysterious phone call. The letters. The red lantern. The locker. Arthur had known exactly where everything was. He had guided Daniel toward the truth. But why? His father explained. Arthur was involved at the beginning. He helped the people who were threatening us. But later, he regretted it. He spent 14 years trying to make things right. Daniel was silent. Then he understood. Arthur had finally given him the truth because he knew he was running out of time. Daniel returned to Blackwood. But Arthur was gone. On the old station platform, Daniel found one final letter. It said, Daniel, I cannot change what happened 14 years ago. I cannot give you back the years you lost with your father. But I can give you something else. The truth. Your father loves you. Your mother loved you. Your sister never forgot you. And despite everything that happened, your family survived. Daniel folded the letter. He looked towards the railway tracks. The morning sun was rising. For years, he had believed that his father's last journey had been the end of his family. But now he understood something. Let's submit. The end of one journey is simply the beginning of another. Daniel walked away from Blackwood Station. He carried his father's old watch in his pocket. And for the first time in 14 years, he didn't carry anger. He was carrying peace. The end. Red Heart.